had a quorum at a point of time. The meeting will shall end at 6:40. If necessary, I will extend by 15 minutes. A reminder, members, if you have a direct computing interest on today's items, and please declare the nature of interest before you speak according to RRP 83A. And urge members to take note of RRP 84 of the rule on voting when you have a direct computing interest. And now we have FCR 2020-21-6 and FCR 2020-21-7. On the provision of welfare facilities to make good use of the meeting time and reduce repetitive questioning. I will have a joint debate on the two items and vote separately. The first document is FCR bracket 2020-21-6. It urges members to approve a $20 billion commitment for the purchase of premises for the provision of welfare facilities. The Labor Welfare Department have consulted the Labor Panel on Welfare on the 10th of June 2019. The welfare has spent 1 hour 12 minutes scrutinizing the proposal. The second document is FCR bracket 2020-21-7. Urge members to endorse the recommendations of the Establishment Subcommittee on the 24th of June 2019 meeting on the creation of one permanent post of the Senior Principal Executive Officer in the Chauffeur Department to head a new planning and development branch to strengthen planning coordination and implementation of capital works project on welfare premises and formulating departmental policies and procedures on all matters related to project planning implementation as well as management and maintenance of provision of welfare facilities. To answer your question, today hope the Deputy Secretary Mr. Leung Chen Wing is here with us today. If anyone would like to ask questions, please press the button. Mr. Charles Mok, 5 minutes. Chairman, as I am not a member in the Establishment Subcommittee, can the officers explain on the procurement of new welfare premises, which area of social welfare would it benefit? Mr. Leung Chong Tai, and Director of Social Welfare, Mr. Gordon Leung. And in the enclosure, we have a list of planned welfare facilities that break down by district. And all in all, we look at the district requirements as well as the waging list, and also our medium and long-term welfare planning and furnishing information. So would it buy property in each 18 district? Yes. So which are the districts which you may focus on? I suppose that not all 18 districts will get an even share. So any particular district that you focus particular? Well, just like Mr. Mark said, well, the total for each district might not be the same. Well, we would also keep in view of the projects in the pipeline and would look at the overall facility situation in each district and come up with a demand estimate before planning for the welfare premises. I wouldn't hard to say which district are in focus. What which district you prepare to spend more? I think there's some members of the public will care that whether it will incline towards a particular developer. Do you have such information that which developer or which owner do you plan to procure the facilities from? Do you have such a breakdown so can tell us that they're relatively independent, or a particular large developer will particularly benefit? Do you have such data at hand? I'd like to respond to Mr. Mark's first question. As for where there are some districts will put more focus on, well, for each district, well, the district welfare officer will gauge the needs of various kind of services, and will also procure by different means or to set up welfare facilities before we come out with the total tally. So we can go to enclosure 3, and you can look at the breakdown by category. As for how would you go about with the purchase, that we set up a committee. Well, simply put, will not have a particular developer or an owner in mind. It very much depends on the demand in that district. So maybe there is some specific requirement for some type of facilities. For example, accessible by the elderly, could not put in high stories, high floors. And the government property agency, GPA colleagues, will help to identify potentially suitable locations and premises. And also through their professional evaluation, what to determine the reasonable price, which they will enter negotiations with the owner. Well, if the price is higher than expected, then we will not add more to our offer. We'll only consider when it's reasonably priced. So you will have a mechanism in place to learn from the NGO or to ascertain the actual demand. Have you completed this exercise, or is this ongoing? Well, that has basically been completed. That's why we're able to come with the enclosure 3. Well, we look at the district demand facilities. For example, in some district, there'll be a higher demand for elderly services, and there we would add more. Well, overall speaking, if you look at the annex, well, mostly elderly, rehabilitation services, and family and child services. So these are categories together with young people services. Next, Mr. Jeremy Tan, 5 minutes. Well, the Transport Housing Bureau is currently building some transitional housing. I point out the problem with transitional housing because the planning had never really make allowances for welfare facilities. For example, whether be some kind of factory buildings or some location that we will be converted into transitional housing. Even though they're called transitional housing, as we know that if the government start going on it, they will go on forever. Just look at those provisional wet market, for example, like the one in Changsha or those at temporary abattoir, to see how long they've stand for. So in view of this, when you are choosing the locations, would you consider next to the sites of transitional housing, would that be one of the factors? Director, please. For what we know, with THP to deal with transitional housing, that it will be led by the NGOs, and which they will ask the NGO proponent to include some kind of welfare facilities in their proposal. So we hope that the new transitional housing will feature some welfare projects. As of now, the transitional housing projects underway, their scales is relatively small and scattered in different districts. So our district welfare officer took note of such development, and where necessary, they will liaise with the relevant NGO to ensure that the demands of the new occupants are met. Oh, all right. Okay. In document you claim that you plan to purchase premises within 3-year time frame. So is that really a hard timetable? So if you notice that the market is very volatile or maybe cheaper to buy later, or in that district there no suitable location in place, but are you under pressure to buy within 3 years? Otherwise, you'll be blamed by your superiors or need to explain to LegCo whether the leftovers money would return to the treasury. So is the 3-year hard fast timetable, or do you have a maximum duration? We see that 3 years as the optimum time frame. In response to Mr. Cham's question, to complete the purchase within 3 years as an appropriate, as mentioned as a paper. Well, on the provision of welfare premises is not just applying funding through the FC. We also have medium and long-term measures. We'll hope to complete the exercise as fast as possible. So the 3 year is our goal. So we see that we're able to achieve by our estimate. You didn't answer my questions. What happened if you're not able to buy within 3 years? I can't project. Well, based on our timetable, we see that we can achievable under 3 years. Well, you can't just estimate. I'm throwing a question to you. If you can't complete all the purchases within 3 years, what you're going to do? Why you feel that you're able to make all the purchases? That's not a must when it comes to a property. I can only say this. Well, just in case, let's say we're not able to, finish the purchase, I think we shall come back to LegCo. Well, we expect there will be regular briefings to LegCo, and you will take note of our progress. I'm just worried that, well, nobody knows what the future will hold. I'm just worried that your colleague will mistake it that you must buy property within 3 years or there will be consequences. I don't think you should adopt this thinking. Well, I suppose that let's say in 3 years and 2 days, or you decide you have to buy anyway or forgo the purchase. I think you need to have some flexibility. Let's say 3 years is your goal, but hopefully that you can complete the whole exercise in 4th and 5th year, and the leftover money will not just spend it, will just return to Treasury. I see this more appropriate instead of having a line. It's also our position as well. Mr. Yu Shi-wing, 5 minutes. Well, the estimate of 20 billion of also for 160 welfare facilities and also 57,000 square meters. And you know the virus have an impact, and the property market was quite hard hit. Have you estimated by now and how many extra premises or square foot can you purchase, or you stick to your old calculations? And second, after making purchase, would you replace some premises or other rental accommodation, and what is the percentage or ratio of property that you will relocate, or how much savings from leases are you expect? If you're able to cut the leasing expenses, so what is the amount? Well, with so many new projects scattered over 18 districts, so would it lead to an increase in overall cost? If you have pay less in lease expenses, and also beside the property expenses, and while operating different centers to really drive up the cost, and what's the estimated increase in costs?
Let me try to address this question. If needed, I will defer to my colleagues. First of all, Mr. Yu asked about whether we would make more purchases with the changes in the market situation. We are going to base this on the latest market situation. Let's say if the property prices plummet, then we will be able to purchase more premises. But then it will depend on the individual cases when the time arises. I cannot give you any specific answers right now. Second question. The premises we are about to purchase will be providing new services. Some of them could be expanded. As to how many lease premises it can replace, I'm sure that there will not be too much of a difference here. Mr. Yu asked whether the purchases would be more expensive than renting premises. I don't think so. Sometimes the landlords are not willing to extend the leases, or they would increase the rental prices. It's actually very frustrating for the government because every time we need to relocate, it's very expensive. We believe that purchasing premises would be a better consideration. How about for overhead expenses? Do you have a budget for overhead expenses now that you are going to purchase more premises? Thank you, Chairman. We will usually apply to the lotteries fund for the capital cost. The operation or the recurring cost will be allocated for every financial year. Thank you. Well, I see that you are going to increase many new facilities. Let's say you're able to achieve the number you estimated. Do you have an estimate on the capacity you'll be able to accommodate? Well, I'm sure you won't know until you actually make a purchase, but from the day of purchase till the retrofitting, till the furnishing of the premises, can you at least know let the organizations know the capacity it can accommodate? It will be difficult for us to really come up with a specific number as we have not even begun our purchases. But in general, it can really help us reduce the waiting time for services. I'm not naive enough to say that the waiting time will be reduced to 0 with our purchases, although it seems that we are buying many premises. We still have high demand for daycare centers for the elderly, neighborhood elderly centers, and rehabilitation services. And as we are buying premises in 18 districts, then it may actually not have such a high margin effect. Ms. Ann Chang. Thank you, Chairman. We're talking about $20 billion here. With the $20 billion, you're going to buy 57,000 square feet to build daycare centers for the elderly, neighborhood elderly centers, child care centers, or preschool rehabilitation services. How are you going to make these purchases? Are you going to put an ad in the newspaper? Are you going to explore in each district? How are you going to do it? Well, the economy is not very positive right now. You are now in a dangerous situation. Everybody knows you have 20 billion in your pocket. Let's say you buy from A, and then people will criticize that you have paid too much for it. And then B tells you that his premises are more convenient. It will be very difficult for you to make purchases now unless you make it very transparent. Let's say you're going to Sham Shui Po. You want to find a 10,000 square feet area for as a center for the elderly. Transportation doesn't have to be very convenient, as they do not need to go to work every day. They do not need to make a long commute. Would you then put out an ad in the newspaper listing out all your requirements? Dr. Chang is correct. We want to make sure our mechanism is fair and transparent, and that we are using our public money well. We are thinking of setting up committee with colleagues from the GPA and from the SWT. Well, these are no use. I just want to know whether you will make public the information. What are you going to buy? Where are you going to buy? And how big the premises are? You're talking about 60,000 feet here, and you're talking about paying 30,000 per foot. You can buy a luxurious home with that money. Do you know what I mean? I'm just worried about the money being spent. And then you still need to pay for retrofitting, furnishings, etc. Look at the subsidized housing now. The management fee costs $4 to $5 per foot. It's even more expensive for new residences. Childcare centers or centers for the elderly are usually of high demand in the grassroots families. So why can't you make these available in public housing estate? Instead, you choose to buy from the private sector. I really don't understand. Can you give me a good explanation? Chairman, Dr. Chang is correct. The public likes to have services close to their neighborhood. We try to accommodate these premises in housing estates, but there's really not that much space in these public housing estates. Therefore, we need to purchase premises for the private sector. We're not talking about luxurious residences. Oh, but you're talking about exorbitant prices here. May I defer to the GPA to address the concern on the purchases? Director, please. Thank you, Chairman. We are going to use a fair and open mechanism in our purchases. We would look at the area and then the convenience of the premises before we make a decision. We are also, so you're going to choose new buildings? Not necessarily. We would look at all the the property information, and we would also look at the newspaper listings and also websites of property companies. We're also going to go into each district to look at the premises. Dr. Chang. Well, of course, you're going to seek the help of property developers. I'm just asking you to be open and transparent. You should make the information public so all those who have premises with your requirements can inform you. Otherwise, you'll be in big trouble. We invite owners and landlords to also to view our website for this information. Mr. Kwong Chun-yu. Thank you, Chairman. The government is taking out 20 billion to purchase premises for the private sector. Well, it seems that no one will object to the building of childcare centers, daycare centers for the elderly and elderly centers. But we must really monitor you carefully. If you do not do this properly, then it will seem that you're working with the property developers. You are spending money from our pockets. We don't want to spend public money unwisely. It's really very difficult. It's not your expertise because you work in the social welfare department. I don't think you are very an expert in buying property. Oh, this is not a new concept. In the 90s, you did purchase premises from the private sector. But you're talking about 20 billion this time. You want to provide more social welfare facilities and services. We have discussed this many times. You should leave area for these in new estates. You must make us confident in what you do. Would you consider buying premises that are not doing well? Of course, you cannot make the information public because you're afraid that the landlords, if they know you're interested in their premises, will raise the price. How are you going to ensure that you are not going to pay more than what it's worth? And how can you ensure that the property market will not fluctuate with this injection of 20 billion in the market? Thank you, Chairman. In our paper, we did say that we are going to look into premises in all the 18 districts. These facilities are differ in sizes. They may not be very large. For elderly centers, they would need to be larger, but for daycare centers, a smaller size would suffice. We can discuss whether we are making these purchases wisely, but as the GPA director said, we hope that anyone who owns such premises would inform us. It's not going to be done secretly. There are some premises in the city that didn't succeed, and these premises are left vacant now. Would you go for those premises? How about a property developer commission? Are you going to give them the same commission they receive usually? In the SWD, we would first quantify the demand, and then we do have different technical requirements for our welfare facilities. For some facilities, we are looking for ground floor premises. But for those that are within a building, we would look to see whether there are any elevators. We would list out all the requirements so that it will be made public. And Ms. Tai can supplement on how to ensure a fair and open mechanism in our purchases. Thank you, Chairman. We were just we are open-minded. As long as it can cater to our demands and our needs and the prices are reasonable, which means whether they are now at market price, and then we could consider. We also look at whether the planning requirements are correct. I just want to understand whether you need to pay huge commission to property developers.
Require the property agency services will not be paying commission. Next, Mr. Wang Tingquan, 5 minutes. Well, I don't know why the government changed its mind to buy property. I remember when the Mandatory Property Fund Authority, when I served on the board, when we scout for offices for purchase, it would be vetoed by the government. And now they keep changing, they keep relocating, and still suffering from high rents from Central relocated to Kwaichong. I don't know why they have a change of heart. Okay, I'll support it. I just want to ask about the details. Just now, Dr. N. Chang did the math. I also did one. 20 billion to 622 square foot. It's about over 30,000 per square foot. I suppose it's almost close to luxury for this price. Well, for the property, for this price, it includes a fitting out, equipment, excluded. It's only talk about the purchase of the premises. Well, since it involves such a colossal amount, I suppose the fitting equipment is about 60% of the purchase cost. For after 20 billion, you still need to have 12 billion more for basic fitting out and furniture and equipment. Okay, excluding the professional equipment, like for the elderly home and the child care centers. And the daycare centers, well, they'll require specialized equipment. Even for the in a home setting, at least 60% of the property price will be for fitting out and buying appliances and furniture. Well, I suppose that there's more after 20 billion. That a lot of money. Have we did the math, or you can apply separately? And respond to another member's query. After we buy this property, the fitting out and the equipment expenses will consider applying through the lottery fund. Well, in our design was supposed we don't need to go through electrical. I hope you don't say that. I don't care if it's lottery funds or not. There's still public money. Well, don't think that you can get money from here and there, and there's not public money. I must correct you. This is all public money. Every dollar and cents you must take it seriously. Another question. For those who are watching now, well, the government know how to apply for the funding in chunks. So I must put it on record. A question for Government Property Agency (GPA). I know that a lot of departments have plenty of vacant premises. For example, like schools. A lot of primary schools, due to low birth rate, have folded. And for those school premises sitting vacant, and a lot of departments are been sitting on a lot of property for no reason, didn't make use of it, and have the GPA consider making use of this vacant property to meet this pressing welfare needs. It would save a lot of money. Ms. Tai of Government Property Administrator. I know that this is one of the among the multi-pronged approach. I suppose the Director of Social Welfare can supplement. The department have looked into the vacant property premises and school premises, and whichever they're suitable for welfare premises, they've been identified. So I suppose that's one of the approach. If you have information now or supplement later, that the to which NGO have the GPA provided empty premises, vacant premises to for premises, and the shortfall will be met by procurement. Again, current mechanism, the SWD will not need to ask the GPA. It's just one government, not a lot of department. Each vacant property controlled by the different departments should be controlled by the GPA. You have this specialist agency to deal with them. Mr. Wang, hang on. David? I respond to Mr. Wang's question. The government vacant property, the SWD will keep this in view. If they identify as suitable for social welfare, will definitely get priority. In most recent few years, the former Kuntang Kai Nang and also the former Siloam Hospital have been converted into a rehabilitation complex, and the SWG have also considered converting the vacant school premises into social welfare units to provide over 700 service places. So that's actually underway, and thank you for Mr. Wang's reminder. Okay, we'll provide if they're available. Mr. Ray Chen, 5 minutes. We'll discuss this paper in the Welfare Service Panel. However, that was a year ago. So 1 year on, things changed. We have the pandemic and the national security law, and there will be sanctions after the passage of the act will affect property prices. Have you considered updating your projections? As for the difference, 1 year ago and 1 year after, and will there be any changes to the number of properties you can afford? I heard from the administration that 158 welfare facilities are rather smaller in size. May I ask why? For the elderly services, the daycare services, and also the neighborhood elderly center and district community center, you have a lot of hotels and guest house closing. I suppose that when you come up with this crafted scheme, do you have any ceiling on the size and also a price cap? Some member asked that whether there were any changes to the number of property target due to changes in the sector. We'll say that as possible. It's been changed every day. Since the last briefing at the Welfare Service Panel, have you reviewed it? We didn't go through a detailed review. As you know that the property market is ever changing by the day. It's been 1 year on since you last come to the Welfare Service Panel. I'm not asking for a daily update or daily review. To respond to Mr. Chen, in my earlier answer, for those we had our eyes on, it's more like a wish list. We hope that that's the minimum number of properties to address our impending need, and where the market conditions allow us to buy more. Of course, we're more than happy to buy more premises so that more welfare facilities can be completed. So, what is the flexibility? You need an NGO to assume operation, or as long as you buy, let's say you have a sharp drop in property, of course you're gonna buy right away. You have a lot of guest houses are being closed down, or you only buy property as soon as you found an NGO to run it. In response to the question, after about the bare shell premises, we need an NGO, a social work agency to operate. in which the funding. Well, I want to know the sequence. Well, in your enclosure 1, I suppose that the NGO have indicated interest, and you claim they could buy more. As for the additional ones, you also have an NGO indicating their intention or the requirement. Of course, you after you buy the premises, you let the NGO take over that administrative arrangements. When you make such a decision, you would first need to have an NGO willingness to run it. Not necessarily. Well, for those on the facility wish list, there have been chronic shortage. Our position is that it's hard to decide whether we have chicken or egg first. That we have a shortage of locations. Thus, we're definitely going ahead. According to standard mechanism, when you have new services, we'll also seek assistance from the social welfare agency to see if they're interested in an operation. And for the operating expenses, we also need to allocate it through our budget. So it all supposed is quite a few things need to come together. Well, you claim that the sizes of the premises are not too big. Is that your policy to target the smaller premises for small services? For example, the no residential homes, do you have a maximum size for and also a price cap? To respond to members' query, well, what our aim were at smaller sizes or lower price premises because the residential home have the special specifications. For example, the location cannot be above 24 meters above ground. So we have the height restriction in place. Let's say the ingress and egress and also the parking spot and also the layout. Whether you need to have separate wards and kitchens and washing and cleaning spaces. For those residential homes, we have a separate planning. For example, whether those built by SWD itself or as members are aware, we also have the special site scheme. So let's say if somebody NGO did not make optimal use of their sites, we'll subsidize them for redevelopment to add more service places. Do you have a size cap? No. Mr. Michael, 5 minutes. Director, we are planning to purchase ready premises for $20 billion, and you claim you were compelled because the government did not provide enough space, and you come with conditions. You give priority to ground level shops and also accessible by stairs, and it should not be too high floors. Well, in theory, the vacant school premises are ideal because they tend to be short and accessible by stairs, and you claim there are quite a few vacant schools that are being used. A few days ago, Development Bureau come to Let's Go, a table paper, and as for the special scheme to make use of vacant government land by the NGOs, I downloaded from the internet. You see that the red circles, you have 900 plots sites in total, and some of them have buildings on them, some of them are vacant lots. And the south of Shenzhen River, you have a lot of dots. It will less in Lantau. Well, Director, I suppose you can look. Do you see that? And Development Bureau have told us there are 900 such plots. Well, at least there are 40 vacant school premises. And there are 20,000 square meters, 800,000 square meters in total. If you took all 40 school premises, you don't need to buy any private premises at all. And yet you have currently just converted a few of those. That's only 40 out of 900. And there are still over 860. I don't know what buildings do they have now. I asked the Secretary for Development, well, have you called the Secretary for Labor and Welfare tell them of the special scheme?
Actually,
Well, you can take up these 900 sites for the SWD use. I think that he did he didn't call the secretary, Mr. Law himself, yet he said he updated it on his website. Do you know that these 900 sites are available, Director? Chairman, Mr. Tian mentioned the vacant school sites. Do you know about these 900 sites? I do not know all 900 sites. Have you inspected these 900 sites? Can you use any of these? Is it because none of them could be used and therefore you need to come up with this plan to make purchases? You have all these available land. Why not use it? And instead you need to come up to ask for extra manpower and for money to make purchases. Chairman, we hope that within 2 or 3 years we'll be able to increase social welfare services. So we're not just talking about land, we're talking about premises. Director, there are 40 vacant sites within these 900 sites, and altogether it's already 800,000 square feet, and there are many premises with buildings built on it already. If you haven't visited all these 900 sites and take a look at the premises, and you should take a look at which can be used and which cannot. Without such number, how can I agree to your using of $20 billion? Chairman, let's first talk about vacant school sites. We did visit all the vacant school sites. Those that could be used, we've already adopted it into our plan. Well, there are 40 vacant school sites here. I want you to provide me with information on all these 40 school sites and tell me why they are not available for use. And can you submit a report on each piece of government and tell us when you have visited and why it's not suitable? And then, and only then, will I vote in favor of this item. Chairman, I have visited all the school sites. As the Secretary for Development mentioned, all the information is online. Members can also browse the information online. Some of the vacant school sites are not available because there are no roads accessible to the schools. There are no footpaths, nor is there vehicular access. Therefore, it is not suitable for use. Well, so you've been there yourself. All right, if you say that there are no roads whatsoever, please submit a report on all these school sites and tell me all these 900 sites cannot be accessible. And then I will vote in favor of your item. Dr. Fernando Chang. We are not standing in the way of the 20 billion. We are basically voting blindfolded. I, however, agree with the concern raised by other members. There are many vacant schools and sites and premises, and they have not been put to good use. Many departments own land that has not been used for over decades. Do we really need to make a purchase in the market? There may be some cases in which this is necessary, especially in densely populated areas where child care service centers and centers for the elderly are desperately needed. But then, is the situation that desperate in all 18 districts? There are actually many issues arising from purchases in the private market. We may be wasting our money, and it can actually give rise to corruption. Can you really speed up the process with 20 billion process? This item was actually brought up last year, but there's still a long way to go. There are many premises that are services that are desperately needed, such as homes for the disabled and also residential homes for the elderly. Every year, thousands of people die waiting to get accepted into residential homes. I think these are very reasonable issues, yet you always seem to make some sort of excuse. You have now listed out what you need in each district. You have made this information public. I want to know whether you have openly asked for available premises in the market, and what part of the process are you in right now? I don't see any open tender on your website. How do you make it public? What do you mean by being open? I'll like Ms. Tai to answer part of the question. I will take the first part of the question. Some members asked about idle land or premises owned by the government. At this stage, I cannot say that all these sites can be used. We do need to look at the different requirements and the town planning prospects. There may be restraints. I do not want to know about that, and Mr. Ten has already asked you that part of the question. Please don't waste time answering it because you don't have any good answers. I would rather you plan well in your new housing estates, for example, to leave 50% GFA for social welfare services and facilities in new areas such as Hong Shui Kiu. That would be much better planning. We did say there are different methods in collecting information in the market. Ms. Tai has also confirmed that we make an open requirement, and everyone could inform us of their available premises. Yes, thank you. We invite landlord to make their information public. We cannot really do anything until FC approves our item. We would also use different ways to look for property information and also make on-site inspections. By different methods, we hope that with this interface we'll be able to get more market information. Mr. Alvin Young, Chairman, Dr. Fernando Chang raised a very important point. Some facilities are not included on the list, including residential care homes. I'm sure many of us think that is very important. Looking at the table in enclosure 1, some people do not really understand the logic. I see that it's 57.7 months and waiting in line for some facilities. That's about 5 years. For neighborhood elderly centers and daycare centers for the elderly, the waiting time is not as long. But for centers for persons with disabilities, you were looking into building 359 facilities. So do you mean that for less waiting time areas, then you would build one of smaller size? We're not objecting to your building of such facilities, but I want to know how you're dividing your pie of $20 billion. The figures may seem to be short term for now. Other than the 20 billion, we do also have short and mid-term plans. We need to look at them in an integrated manner and then to make a balanced decision. Mr. Lam can answer part of your question on why residential homes are not included. Usually, the area will need to be larger for residential care homes, and they would need to comply with more stringent requirements. So there needs to be better ventilation. If we're able to purchase a larger premise in the private market, then it would be more ideal. It would be therefore we would rather build special premises for residential care homes. Chairman, does it mean that since it's difficult to identify such sites, the 20 billion would not be spent on residential care homes? Am I correct? Do you have any long-term plan to reassure the public that there is going to be money invested in residential care homes as well? How about for activity center? We see that there is only going to be 3, and that's really not adequate. Is this also a technical difficulty in building activity centers? Thank you, Chairman. This question has also been raised in the panel discussion. We did mention this in Capital 5 that other than purchasing premises, we have also listed out planned social welfare facilities in the next 10 years in our enclosures. And under our special site scheme, we have also listed information in enclosures 2 and 3, and we can only see the whole picture by reading all these enclosures. This item for now is only a short-term plan. We hope to be able to purchase certain premises for use for the time being. We are not forgetting residential care homes. Those will be part of our medium and long-term plans. I also want to add that Dr. Chang's suggestion on better planning for new residential areas. And we did look into this planning ratio, which has already been adopted into the Hong Kong Planning Standards and Guidelines for new residential development areas. We are now working on rehabilitation services facilities as well. And we are going to also incorporate all these into the population-based planning ratio for future planning.
Mr. Wu Chiwei. well, of the 160 welfare facilities to be procured, have you managed to satisfy or settle the outstanding facility shortfall according to HKPSG? So, second question: have the government had in mind or the kind of property they want, or at least some idea, because the type of premises you purchase were able to meet your needs to make it work. So that's why I want to know if you have an idea at this stage. When talk about HKPSG, that for a certain size of population, there should be we prescribed the type of facilities to be provided. Well, are you really plug the shortfall as per the HKPSG, or if you have demand in point A, and however that will be met through in point B, however no matter distance may be between A and B must be huge. And next, well, in the paper you stated that the total floor space you can purchase about 57 square meters. For 20 billion, the average, like my colleague said, this is about work out to about $30,000 per square foot. Well, according to the public opinion, well, the drop in non-residential property is quite substantial. I believe that you will be only buy at a good price, and I don't think you'll be ripped off. Well, for $20 billion for 50,000 square meters, well, would the colleague will adopt the 20,000 square meters at the yardstick or the 20 billion? Would any leftovers after 3 years would it return to the Treasury? Director, please. But the members asked that after we procure the premises we want, we're able to meet the planning standard. As far as we know, and it will still have some shortfall. Besides this 20 billion plan, in the medium to long run, we'll still try to identify new sites to build new facilities, so as to meet the public demand. As for members also asked that while with the FC permission, we'll use the 20 billion as a basis. It will be based on the prevailing market prices as reference. If the market condition is going down, we expect the prices will also drop. The members also asked, well, in which case does that mean we can buy more property, or more space can be bought? Which depends circumstances. We'll try to make the most use of the 20 billion to meet the public demand social services. You can buy more, or you still stick to the 160 premises. Depends on the available premises in the market. For example, for certain type of facilities, what is the optimal size for the NGO operation? Well, if the size is pretty much established, well, and for bigger premises, can the services be scaled up as well? That's something we need to consider. Of course, I know that the demand is not static. So my question should be, Well, since there's a shortage of social welfare facilities, so we need to let Mr. Wu have the mic. So after this exercise, well, in theory, the other social service demand can be met through by the government. I don't have such figure at hand. I believe there's still a shortfall, and well, like the deputy secretary said, for the new standards to be rolled out, they will apply to new development areas. As we know, that the completion date is probably not set in stone. Well, even the target state, the infrastructure and planning would require a long, considerable period of time. So this is really in progress. Well, for the short-term measures, if they go ahead, and also for the medium and long-term measures we had. However, for each measure, when it and for the facility to be commissioned, it will take a lot of time, and that's the supply side uncertainty. For the demand side, Hong Kong population is aging, and they're also evolving social welfare demand, and including those provided by the SWD, will also subject to change. For example, we used to stress about the residential home. Well, now that we'll add more community or home care services. Thus, the premises requirement will also evolve. Well, these different categories, we need to make the planning as per the actual changes. And however, our wish list in the proposal, in any case, we shall require them in any case. Dr. K. Kwok, 5 minutes. I believe that, well, buying 158 welfare premises is well intended. However, it seems to be a market propping fund over actual demand, especially these 2 years when the social environment, including due to the COVID-19 and also the Hong Kong national security law have put under the cloud. We see a lot of people are unloading their property and residential and commercial to emigrate elsewhere. Well, we worry that this may be used for propping up the property market. But according to the director, they need to consider the needs of the new development area. I think you have got your priorities wrong. The new development areas, the government had controlled the planning. For example, the type of social welfare facilities included. Well, 2 items earlier we talked about the Hong Shui Q NDA. The government did not disclose or try its best to ask the SWD to provide the social welfare facilities there. Well, earlier have asked Development Bureau that whether there's such a keen demand for commercial floor space. They couldn't give an answer. But we see that the economic outlook will be negative, and also due to national security and others so on. Do we need to reserve so much space for commercial development? I suppose that you can free up a lot of this land in NDA for social welfare facilities. Well, within the government, other than the vacant school premises, well, there's a lot of ground floors of public housing block that not to unleash the potential that's ideal for social welfare, especially the older districts where it's impossible to build a standalone welfare building block complex. Well, have you sorted out with the housing department on the feasibility of this option? And third, economic consideration. Well, looking at how the economy is performing, and you decide to enter the market at this stage, well, maybe 20 billion, and 3 years later, the price would have dropped by $5 to $6 billion. That's a huge loss of public money. Of course, the speculator would like to thank you for that. Well, investors in those dead shopping malls are waiting for your relief because, well, the shopping mall is deserted and they're glad for you to take over. Do you want to be the savior for deserted shopping malls, or you really want to do good for the social welfare recipients? Last question. Let's say we don't take this approach. Well, let's say by using for the vacant offices in public housing blocks, and how much savings can you achieve? Can you able to enhance the manpower and also the equipment as social service unit? Wouldn't they offer a better deal? I try to answer members' question, and also would reply to the use of the vacant school premises. So for those who are moving ready, we already make use of them. Well, some of them are not accessible by roads, or some of the school premises are crumbling or become a condemned structure. Well, when the housing department identify any room suitable for social welfare, we discuss, do you have a checklist by the HD that can be converted to social welfare facilities? I will check after the meeting. Well, for the ground level shops in the housing department also have keen demand for them. But for those space available is very limited. Well, very often they may not be suitable for facilities. Well, I mean, those are wanted by nobody, or they're actually very difficult for social welfare use. We tried very hard, but in reality, it's not an easy task. As for the economic consideration, well, the market will go up and down. We try to explain that we'll use the prevailing market conditions to consider whether we should purchase the premises. We hope that this approach allow us for the prudent use of public money. Okay, that's the end of my response. Mr. Kwok Wai Karen, 5 minutes. So after a year of blacklet violence, Hong Kong could have turned into another Ukraine that will be a land of rebel. But thank God and goodness we have the strong support of the country. We're still standing. Otherwise, our property will be worthless. While the electrical nowadays, somebody rely on fabrication for a living. However, we need to stick to business. For the $20 billion to procure private premises for provision of welfare facilities, the objective is clear: to address our chronic shortage of locations, thus fail to diversify and convenience social services. Under this premises, just like we provide social well services, even though expensive, we still have to proceed. Well, as somebody see that as some kind of investment company, you can get a good bargain and get all the upside. That's impossible. Please don't make up stories and deflect the attention. Well, if you buy, it's better to be close to the market price. So last year, that well, the landowners may try to maximize their valuation. Well, even though the property prices did not go down yet, for the rent have decreased. I suppose there's room for bargaining. I hope that departments will make a purchase. We try to stick to the market price. So long as close to market price, to be immune from criticism. How come it's strange? The depreciation is actually much less than it is rises. Well, suppose that you finish with the premises, the unit stop running. There's still residual value. That probably will not worth zero. I suppose that you can let the government to go ahead. Of course, the government did not have a buyer and therefore could not compare valuations. I'm not trying to blame you. I'm expected that you will buy some expensive property, but as the key is to serve the public.
有
Some members also asked whether we could purchase a hotel or industrial building to do that. I'm open-minded. You can try doing that. However, we need to take note that for standalone buildings, and yes, it could accommodate more services, but then it would not be easily accessible for all. We just hope that the services can be provided in a timely manner. How are you going to assess the management fees? I work as a district councillor in a private residential area. Sometimes when the price goes down, it's because of the structural problem. Can you make sure that the premises will not depreciate after a period of time? Thank you, Mr. Kwok, for your support. I believe that our team will prudently assess management fees and structural matters. I would defer to Ms. Tai. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Kwok. When we consider whether a building is suitable, we will look at the structural issue. We'll also look at the fire safety services, facilities, and of course, we would also consider depreciation issue. In the past, there have been cases in which there are no problems with the first, second, and third floor, yet the mezzanine floor was a problem. So I think we need to look at the structure of the entire building and not just certain floors. Members suggest going for open tender. However, I don't think this is ideal. We will just be overcharged. I suggest that we not make any information public before making a purchase. Otherwise, you would just be charged more since you were the government. However, you can disclose the information after the purchase has been confirmed. Next, Ms. Claudia Mo, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. It seems the 20 billion is a go-ahead for sure. However, I'm a bit concerned. Are you trying to ensure that the market price will not drop? Now with the pandemic hitting our economy hard, and with the national security law affecting investors' confidence, it's really difficult to know why you are bringing this forward. I do not hear anything about the fitting out of the premises. Does the 20 billion include fitting out cost? Because it can be very expensive. And during the process, how transparent will you be? What are the monitoring procedures? Who will be in charge of the monitoring? Are you going to submit a report back to the Legislative Council? I'm just worried that if no one is monitoring this, I don't know how you're going to spend it. We're not talking about a small amount here. We're talking about $20 billion. And we are not sure of the market right now. Well, some members asked you to make good use of the opportunity. You're not a property agent. How do you know when the market will be good? You won't know. I really am not sure I understand this correctly. You say that you need to make purchases because the government cannot provide you with adequate land. It seems hard for me to object to this item. Yet, can you tell me what you're going to do with all these premises in the future? What if there's a change in population number, or what if there is no further need for such facilities? What is your long-term plan? Director. Other than Ms. Mo, some other members also expressed concern on open and transparent purchasing process. The GPA and SWD will be in charge of monitoring the process. The SWD has different technical requirements for different facilities and services. For example, different height requirements, etc. We will provide this information to the GPA, and the GPA will then explore possibilities in the market. And to see whether there is any information provided by landlords, we would also provide open invitation to interested landlords to provide their information. After collecting all information, the GPA will also assess the latest market situation and set reasonable prices. I'm sorry, Chairman, he's taking a long time in answering the questions. So basically, it's all internal affairs. It's obvious that you're not going to submit a progress report to LegCo or come answer any questions by members. That is very clear. There is a saying in Chinese that you are just going to handle this internally and nobody will know what's happening. What if the media asks you for such a report? Would you also hand it over? Chairman, we are going to provide this information, I think, once a year. I hope you understand that each transaction will need discussions and it's not appropriate to report during when discussions are taking place, but we would come back with progress reports once a year. Ms. Yong Ho Yan, Chairman, I support this item. 15 years ago, 1.3 billion was spent to acquire 63 premises. Well, compared to what we are going to purchase with 20 billion and with more expensive prices, looking back, we should have bought more back then. There is dire need for such premises. Some members suggest buying an industrial building to accommodate all the facilities. However, that's not very feasible because we're talking about needs and facilities in 18 districts. One childcare center cannot provide service to everyone in 18 districts. Therefore, I believe that purchasing private premises to provide social welfare facilities is really needed. We're not talking about new development areas in Hong Shui Kiu or in the New Territories North. We see aging population and elderly services are really desperately needed. I believe that premises purchasing can be something recurrent and not just to acquire a number of premises every decade or so. I see there are around 28 childcare centers to be provided. We see a list on the number of childcare centers, daycare centers for the elderly, neighborhood elderly centers, and rehabilitation services, etc. Can you actually tell us how much the waiting time could be reduced with these new facilities? I know that the current waiting time is around 2 years. So from newborn till 2 years old, you need to put your child in a nursery for a while before you can attend these childcare centers, which is really not ideal. This is one way in which you could resolve some of these inadequacies. In the next 3 years, you're going to purchase over 100 premises. How much waiting time could you reduce by that? And in the long run, can you really also help further reduce the waiting time? We lack around 300 daycare centers for the elderly and also residential care homes. I want to see in the long run how much waiting time can you reduce for all these facilities and services. So adding the previous 60 premises that you bought 10 years ago, do you actually have information on vacant sites by these organizations? Can you actually make use of some of the vacant sites by these organizations? Once we make new purchases, we can take a look at the waiting line. However, it's very difficult to quantify the waiting time as each district is different. We can only say that with these new facilities, it would be conducive to the reduction of waiting time. As of today, we are still using all the premises we have bought. None of it have been made vacant. Only one has been given back to us, but it is mostly because it is in a basement and there are no elevators in that building. So there has been a change in hands of these elderly centers. We are now discussing with an organization to see whether it could become an office instead. Mr. Wilson, thank you, Chairman. You're looking into purchasing 160 premises for social welfare use in the next 3 years. I am quite supportive of that. This is something we really must do because we do have desperate need for social welfare facilities. However, you're looking into adding in a post of a senior principal executive officer. I see in the paper that each assistant director right now works in planning and development. Why do you still need to open a new post? And this person actually will be making about 200,000 per month. Why do you need to open a new post when actually other officers are already taking up part of the work?
Public seems to give the impression there's a lot of vacant government land, for example, like disused school premises or vacant government lots they're sitting idle. Before you use this 20 billion to buy private premises, have you did some stock taking of the vacant lots and school premises that could be used more optimally? As you know that this 20 billion thrown out, well, you already have so much government land sitting idle. Why don't you make use of those land first? For all along, I haven't heard the government have actually respond to that. The third question. Just now, the colleagues are concerned about the transparency. Well, you use that for public money, even though you will come back to legislature for annual briefing, the public will care whether you spend on the right places, since it's just public money, the hard-earned taxpayers' money. And note that the paper you claim to have a steering committee in place to be led by the Director of Social Welfare Department, and also the GPA will serve as a member. Well, can you expand the membership to cover legislative members and district councillors as member of the steering committee? While the upside being a better gauge of the public sentiment, it also have a check and balance. Well, the annual briefing to legislature is too little, but how do we avoid the bad public perception, the lack of transparency? Therefore, they will avoid the impression of property of the property market or collusion. The last question, while buying the premises of the 160 facility will be scattered in 18 districts, where Kowloon is the most familiar with, I know that Kowloon, Kwun Tong, and Wong Tai Sin, I suppose that Kwun Tong is still okay. I suppose the actual demand for Wong Tai Sin, I don't really see as much relief. Besides reference to the HKPSG, what other data are supporting to buy different types of premises to plug the the gap in different districts? As for the senior principal executive officer position, that assumes that all other assistant directors have also have planning and development under their function. And why do you have to create a specialized position? The current planning and development is only as they have some planning in their service branch, for example. And how do we plan on the elderly services and also on the family services? So really on formulating service design and service standards. Well, for they proposed that position, they will specialize on property. In another paper, we have laid out. Well, first, we'll need to purchase a large amount of property, and second, we also will have this special scheme on privately owned site for welfare use, which have a dozen of projects waiting to take off. As for the projects under the lotteries fund, would also require architects and engineers to give their technical advice before they completing the funding stage. Well, altogether, there are over 250 projects in the pipeline. Thus, we need a dedicated staff to coordinate and to rationalize this task. We also need to liaise with different government departments and also with the user NGO. Thus, the work is getting complex. Without this position, that it will be allocated money and the land, I will not able to construct all the facilities in town to meet the demand. So that's the first point. The second point, and on the vacant land and school premises, like I said, and for the vacant government lots to be able to meet our immediate need for a land to start building. Well, it will take 3 to 7 years, and some of the projects, and after going through all the planning approvals and so on, it will take about a decade before it can be commissioned. It's not that we're foregoing such possibilities. And so we see a suitable size will start chasing. However, the plan being tabled, we see this necessary to meet at least the immediate demand. And though the school premiums are already answered early inquiries. Well, recently we have carefully considered assessed each vacant school premises, and those who are usable already put in use, and the others have some geographical constraint, for example, on a slope or not accessible by roads or only have a very narrow footpath. And even if we make use of the site, the family members may not be able to visit their loved ones. So I got plenty of examples of this. I have really seen them personally and deemed them not suitable. You have way overrun. Mr. Yip, can you in 5 minutes? Just now, the director mentioned about the vacant school premises, and a lot of members also talk about the vacant school premises. I wonder if it could offer the immediate relief in social welfare shock gap. Well, 20 billion is quite a substantive sum. As of this March, there are 234 vacant school lots. About 80% of those, 181 of those, after the Plan D assessment, have decided to be preserved in the long run for GIC. About 20 of those in the urban areas, or next to the new town public housing estate, from 1,900 square meters to 37 square meters. I see that as a real possibility for you to review. I've been to some school premises or passed by. I saw that they're in very bad state. That this disused school premises, all the windows broken and weed grown all over, and all the rodents infesting. And after being deserted, you see the upstairs being vacated, the downstairs is still in use. And after the upstairs being vacated, and there will be water and dripping to the lower floors, and led to all kind of molding and so on. For this type of school premises still exists. I've been there myself. So this long time vacant are not only precious land resources, and yet we need to spend public money managing them. According to the budget in 2013 to 14 to 2021, the EDB on the managing of vacant school premises, for example, security patrol and rodent control and rubbish clearing, and also the weeding, the expenditure risen from 72 million to 181 million. So that's a double waste of resources. In fact, for the past 3 years, there are only less than 10 of the vacant school premises could be used for school decanting purposes. When the government planned to use 20 billion to purchase private premises for social welfare, I see that as well intended. But have you really reviewed the vacant school premises in your district? I have written back in last June on this problem. I see that worthwhile to investigate. In page 5, a list of various uses the child care centers and integrated child care centers, rehabilitation complex, and the young people services. We see that there's sufficient space and the hardware in vacant school premises for them to make use. Well, that's been touched on by a lot of colleagues, and I suppose you can consider where there is reduces expenditure to purchase private premises. Well, while you spend the money to buy private premises while letting the vacant school premises stay idle, that would be a huge waste. I want to reiterate this demand. Well, I readily respond to similar inquiries. Some information we get, they will all make use of the readily available school premises. Where in the long run, we can keep in view that whether some school campus that after some conversion can be put to welfare use. We keep an open mind to this. Next, Mr. Wuchiwai. Well, I didn't get an answer to my earlier question. Well, since you're buying the private premises, of course, there will be a small locations and a bigger community. Well, the demand may not exist in the location where you bought. I wonder if there's some kind of asymmetry of the service you want is actually situated on another point that's far from where you can buy. Of course, that would not be ideal from the provision. I wonder would that happen. All along, you claim that using 159 facility as the standard, but in fact, the market condition will keep changing. Maybe you can manage to buy way more than 158 units. Depends on the property market conditions. I don't quite get that from your checklist you already have a contingency plan that allow you to buy more. That for those who are not put in the wishing list, that will also be included in your target, so that you wouldn't have any leftovers money, and so that there would lead to delays in some social services. Besides the 158 facilities, would you have other services that could be included? And note that you have a 3-year time limit to complete the purchase. Well, just in case the market is go on a chip and you have a lot of money saved over, you're required to fully spend the 20 billion, or whatever leftovers will go back to the treasury. As for the members concerned, whether there will be a mismatch between the location of the premise and the actual demand. I suppose that it's impossible to be 100%, but the district welfare officer will be familiar with the service requirement. However, without a particular street or block, whether it could be convenient to some other group, I wouldn't get to this. Well, you know that each sub-unit have their own catchment area. They usually adopt this standard. I wonder that the unit you bought has complete mismatch with the catchment area or out of the catchment area. If you assure me that no, of course I'm all right. If this would happen, I wonder how severe would the impact be. Of course, we look at to avoid the mismatched. Looking for a ground floor shop will help to meet the need of the users, and also that's something we'll consider. Is that yes or no? Will it happen or not? We'll try to avoid a mismatch. Well, it's hard to speak hypothetically. Let's say for a certain district, we need to have an elderly center. We try to explain the basic requirement of an elderly center, and operational requirements will be well versed. For example, the size and the floor, the other fire safety. And in the market, we need to identify suitable premises. Well, at least they're able to take our checklist, and you have other options. While thinking about it, do you know that please say for next round.
Dr. Fernand Chang, 4 minutes. Chairman, last year we discussed this in the panel meeting, And we also had a similar concern to what Mr. Hu Ji-hui raised now on whether the catchment is suitable. We are just afraid that you'll be paying exorbitant prices, and that in a way would actually be lifting market prices and giving rise to corruption. I'm not saying that the administration will engage in corruption, but there may be any illegal profit made during the process. Director, you mentioned that there will be a steering committee in which you will head. If you want my support, I hope you would also include stakeholders in your steering committee to see whether these facilities can accommodate to their needs. Thus, there would be a third-party monitoring which could alleviate our concerns. Would you be able to comply with such an arrangement? Director, we did consider this, but we don't believe that it's suitable to invite stakeholders to join the steering committee. Many of the information is market sensitive. Therefore, we believe that with external stakeholders, it will not be suitable. We also expressed that we are willing to come back with progress reports to LegCo. All civil servants are regulated, and we believe that there is no need to have other stakeholders monitoring our work. It is really hard to believe you're holding on to 20 billion. How can you reassure the public that you're an expert in property purchases? We would agree if you engage the services of individual consultants or stakeholders, but you're not doing that. I don't think inviting individual consultants or stakeholders or users would really affect the work of the committee. You keep on emphasizing that there is market-sensitive information, but they don't need to be privy to that in your meetings. I do not have any further to supplement. Mr. Chiu Ka-chun. To the director, you might think that spending 20 billion on social welfare facilities can really meet the desperate need of the people. But I and many members are concerned about how the money will be used. Let me give you a couple of examples. Earlier, the government used the lotteries fund in an improper manner. And second example, Mr. Ip Kin Yoon also mentioned it, that there are many vacant government sites that have not yet been used, yet you choose not to use them and instead to buy new premises. I have sent a letter earlier to the administration asking why you're not including integrative services for families in this 20 billion, and the government responded that this is not included in this item. Well, it is really difficult for me to comprehend. In the 90s, in the list of purchases, 9 of them are used for integrated family services, implicating that there is such a need. Well, although that is sort of like an outreach program, you do need to provide rehabilitation services and you need a kitchen to provide for the meals. And these all take up space. In recent years, the waiting line has been longer and longer. The government wants the services to be home-based. And therefore, it is very difficult for these meal services to be provided. So are you still not going to make purchases for the integrated family services? I want to tell you that we really have a dire need for these services. Director, let me try to answer your question. The integrated family services would need premises, but experience has told us that we don't need a center for users. Instead, it's more of an outreach program. We understand there is a need for base, but the area needed is not large. Therefore, leased premises would suffice. Let me see if Mr. Lam has anything to add. Chairman, integrated family services provide different services, and the area needed is not large. They only need around 90 square meters, and it is a bit easier to lease such spaces than making purchases. Therefore, we did not include it in our 20 billion this time. Chairman, I hope you understand that this is different from your written reply. In your written reply, you told me that there is no need for space because it's all outreach services. But now you tell me that you do need a space, but you find it easier to rent. Why not listen to our suggestions? Dr. Fernando Chung and I both suggested, yet you do not adopt any of our suggestions. You don't deny there is a need for space. You need an area for storage, you need kitchen facilities to provide meals, yet you're not able to provide it. So why do you choose to rent instead of purchasing? I don't understand why you need to purchase larger premises yet rent smaller premises. Director, the integrated family services centers are only for staff use. The users will not be going into those premises. It's only for the staff to prepare for the services. We understand that there is need for all services, but this time we put on our list the more prioritized items. Dr. Kiki Kwok, 4 minutes. Thank you. I heard Mr. Ip Kin Yoon mentioning vacant school sites. The EDB has spent a lot of money on vacant school sites in maintaining the sites. Many facilities are actually suitable to be used in these vacant school sites. For example, centers for the elderly, you need 48. These centers for the elderly should be large areas in which they could stretch or exercise according to what the physiotherapist recommends. General shopping malls would not be adequate because they are in these very poorly maintained buildings, and there's no space outdoors. What you see outside is only the road, and there are no spaces for the elderly to walk or stretch around. However, the vacant school sites, I remember in Choi Sak Mei, where explosives were found last time, have been vacated for a very long period of time, and it's used for police training at times. That site is close to residential areas, and there is a sports ground. Suitable for the elderly to walk about. These are the best sites. Government vacant school sites or vacant office space or ground floor in public estates, if these have all been used, then it's all right. But we do not see you doing that. Instead, you are just announcing that you are going to use the 20 billion for sure. This is not very responsible. You still have many sites in your hands, such as vacant school sites, offices, and ground floor areas in public housing estates. Can you actually try to make a match first before you spend the money? Director, I repeat, Chairman, we have inspected each and every one vacant school. If you think we have missed out on some, we are willing to go back and inspect it again. But I do emphasize that we have visited every one of them. Well, how about for vacant office spaces? Do you have a list for us to see? Very often, our district colleagues will pay close attention to government-owned land and spaces, and they will proactively ask whether those vacant places could be used once they become empty. They know how many vacant government sites there are. The planning department will explore the needs of the different departments. Other than the SWD, other departments also lack office space. And we would need to see whether some spaces have been allocated. That we can give you a definite answer that whenever there are vacant sites available, we do our best to acquire those spaces. Mr. Etichu, are you going to extend the meeting? Yes, so extend by 15 minutes, but we're not going to put the item to vote today. I'd like to ask about the process in paragraph on page 3 in the note, Dr. Fernando Chung asked about the information online on asking for landlord's information.
I'm quite intrigued by this. Well, for a steering committee formed by all government officials in which the GPA will try to identify available premises in the market, just like do as a private entity. So some may concern that there will be impropriety. On the other hand, as if you do so by inviting tender by listing out your specifications, and if there are one or more available property available that would meet your standards, the government would have the buyer's advantage. Well, according to Dr. Chung, you have never tried this. May I hear from the GPA that for the public sector around the world, would they have similar experiences that serve as your reference, in which they use open invitation, which you can choose the lowest price of property? I wonder if you can share such kind of information with us. Well, we try to do so in a partial and proper manner. As for what Mr. Chair referred to, we hope to invite owners with the suitable property on our website for their consideration. Well, we hope to collect the different information. Our colleagues would do our own property evaluation. As per the SWD request, we should do professional assessment to ensure that it's within the market price range and also close to the recent transaction price of setting the highest acceptable price, which we will use it to negotiate with the landowner, so that we can able to buy the best with the best price, and the final price should not exceed the cap we recommended. Well, you mentioned that we take on various approaches. Well, for the open invitation, we'll proceed on in any case. So after we endorse this proposal, and the public, in due course, will see this checklist. I see a lot of queries why yet use of vacant government land or school premises. Well, the public do not have enough information. If the GPA can offer the list of requirements, at the same time you're able to satisfy the public right to know, so that the public will know where there is no space available, so as to confirm the government has a genuine need to buy premises. So I just want to confirm that you will take this step in regardless, and you will and on the level of information available to the public. We will take the step after the FC had passed this motion. We'll set out the requirement by each district for the prospective seller information. And for the purchase of premises back in 1995 to 1998, which involved 63 premises, that you have not considered resale. And I see that as a short-term program, but it's been over 20 years since the last scheme. This seems is no longer a short-term scheme. you tend to cope with the short-term need. However, we will hold on the property for a long time. Will not consider resale when you have other GIC sites available. Well, I hope that this short-term measure to meet the immediate or SWD. Well, the government plans to hold to the property for the long time after purchase. Well, these will to meet the recurrent welfare needs. As of the present, the demand is still here. Therefore, the government had no plan to resell. Mr. Wilson, or just follow on the earlier question, the director claimed that the post of assistant director is necessary. From what I know, that their colleague may not be able to have the professional knowledge of property transaction. You might go through the agents and consultants. Must you create this position? I hope that you can answer in detail. As for the lack of service user and electrical or DC members, I think it's not comprehensive in the steering committee. Well, we rely on the government judgment. When it comes to check and balances, you better have public participation for scrutiny. I hope that the director or the deputy secretary can do some reflection whether it's better to include such persons for check and balances. And the third question, when I didn't get an answer, check count is, for example, there will be 19 projects require purchase. Not the location will be within commercial buildings or revitalized industrial buildings. How do we ensure, well, for Kwun Chong, while the residents are living on an uphill, for example, they will need to go to the industrial district in the town center, which quite far away. How do we consider this when making the purchase? A last question not answered by the DS. For example, for the vacant government land and the school premises. And after stock taking, what is the total floor space vacant? Why there is so many vacant sites sitting idle, doing nothing? And why do we make use of them? So, but you explained that maybe you're not able to, ready. Does that show that the administration showed a lack of coordination among departments or wasting government resources? I'll first take the question on the proposed position. While the current assistant director would only on the service branch, and the assistant director will work on the subventions. This answer might give me the straight down answer. I don't want to press for the third time. Why this colleague will need to be focused on this, even though it's not a property agent. However, we need to liaise with lots of government departments and to do some rationalization. Besides the property purchase, some of the social welfare NGO will need to redevelop their sites and also have to relaxing the plot ratio and also changing their land use, which require this position to offer assistance. As for the formation of the steering committee, I noted the member's suggestion. However, I already responded. Our current view is that it is not suitable for public participation in the steering committee. This committee will contain a lot of market information, for example, on specific sites and premises, and the offer from the seller, and also and on the counter offer strategy from the seller. And if there were non-civil service involved, it might complicate things. As for the Kowloon East, and how to make sure that they were closely hewn onto the public needs. Well, after we list out the requirements and identify the suitable locations, and then we'll conduct a individual selection. Well, just one more question. And how many square foot is sitting vacant? Can you provide after the meeting? I don't want to press the button for the third time. Next, Mr. Jeremy Tam, 4 minutes. We'll have other meeting upstairs. Pardon me if I repeat the question. I'm most concerned that you buy on the high. Well, people know that it's the government, and then they just hike the price, and thus you get ripped off. I wonder if the question been asked by colleague, would you buying a property with existing tenancy? Well, you plan to procure the property within 3 years. If some of them are very suitable, whether in terms of location and price, but now they have still a tenancy in place, so maybe the lease will run out within 6 months or a year. So in this case, how would the government approach it? There are three options. One, forget about it, because you want to make sure it's ready to move in. Two, you buy it anyway. Well, still accept the lease payment, and third, pay the down payment first, and the closing period would take place a year later. So which option would you choose? As for whether the government would buy too expensive, we'll make sure that we're in line with the market pulse and for the reasonable price. If the seller asking for a price above that, we'll consider that. So we'll not be propping up the property market. We're simply following the market. And second, for the premise with the tenancy, what would you consider? We try not to consider that because we want to get the premises ready for social welfare. Unless the tenancy still remains for a short time, including the transaction period, whether it could be vacated. Otherwise, we're disinclined to purchase premises with tenancy. Well, for how long can you put up with? Maybe a few months. Well, but that means that it should be turnkey then. All right. Well, for a very simple premise, let's say you have to wait for a year before you can take back. Is it better for you? Well, please remember, you claim it's just a year together with a completion or 90 days or over 2 to 3 months. You probably just have to wait 8 to 9 months more. However, if there's ideally located and also an ideal price, an ideal size, you are buying second-hand from the market. Well, would you consider brand new property? We're not ruling out anything. All right, I feel better. For second-hand property, well, you can't really choose for much for second-hand property. It's just really a rough preference, maybe a high or low stories or direction. For second-hand property, you don't know if there is a better premise that will be on sale. If you can draw the line that allow you to buy some a tenancy and occupation, however, they must be vacated within 6 months. I'm surprised that you're not able to offer a specific guideline. You claim you try your best because you just, I wouldn't say personalization, just too much human factor on the case basis. However, there's no yardstick. When I asked you initially, what happened if you're not able to buy enough after 3 years? Any response? We're out of time. I would like to listen to the GPA input. I know what the miscellaneous, if the waiting time would be roughly the same as a transaction time, based on the preferred, of course that will be considered. However, if we need to wait for a very long time to move in, I'm worried that we go against our policy objective because we want to see secure the premises for the provision services as soon as possible. The time's up. Meeting adjourned.